Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where people are. Welcome to our DPLA session here and meeting. I'm Felton Thomas. I'm the chair of the board, also the director of the Coon Public Library. So I'm looking forward to welcoming you all to what is going to be a really interesting panel. Also, I think Mr. Bracken has an announcement to make if you haven't already heard. So I will just turn it over to John and let him do the announcement and introductions and whatever he'd like to do.
Good morning. Thank you, Felton. Welcome, everyone. You caught me for a second. I'm like, oh man, what announcement do we have? I got to come up with something. I got to set something good. So welcome to our first community open board meeting of the year. Sometimes we haven't done it this year as a team, but in the past, sometimes as a team, we've kind of at the beginning of the year shared out phrases that feel like they're core to the year. I'm looking at you, Shaneé. You usually kick that off. And for this conversation, I was beginning to think about that, and the word that came to mind for me was impact. I feel like, and this reflect over the last 3 years of the pandemic, a lot of the work we were doing and a lot of the work a lot of us was doing was, let's get through this, let's get through the other side. And as we start this year, of course, we don't know what surprises the world's going to bring to us. But I do feel like the combination of where we are as a team, where we are as a community, where we are as a world, and where we are with the board that's here with us gives us an opportunity to recenter and refocus and re-articulate out what we mean by impact and how we're increasing our focus on really having taking our mission of improving access for all to content in a digital age, ensuring that digital means more access to content, not less, and really thinking about how that really changes people's lives in a positive way. As I say that, I do also want to introduce the other board members who are here, and I see Joe Lucia from Temple, and I don't see the folks who might be off camera, but we will pull them in when we get to the discussion. There's one. There's Jill Bourne from San Jose Library. Thank you. My machine's not letting me see folks who are off camera, and others will be coming in or may be off camera. Three things I want to highlight briefly before we get into the meat of the discussion and before I hand things over to Shaneé and Michael. One, last week you may have seen that we released a second version of a book called January 6th on the Record, a compendium of the Joint Congressional Committee's review of the January 6th incident. And that is available for free download along with a bunch of other of our titles in the link that Kat is sharing. Good morning, Elaine Westbrooks from Cornell University. Good afternoon. Second, the Curation Core, which is a really core part of our community that helps us decide directions and helps place books into our collections, is expanding. We're growing the Curation Core. It's really a core part of who we are and what we do. And I see Kat just shared the link for that. Third, also as part of our ebooks work, we've been in a partnership with Lyricist for the last few years in what's called the Palace Project. We are co-hosting a Palace 101 webinar in about, is it next week? In 2 weeks, in 10 days. Which you're all with Lyricist, which you're all invited to. So those are some things that are happening right now, and some opportunities to learn more and to join and be more active. As part of handing the mic over and diving deeper and talking about the Wikimedia related project, I think I want to say we're incredibly grateful to Sloan Foundation. The announcement I think Felton was teeing me up for was what we released, I think on Wednesday or Thursday of last week, which was the news that Sloan Foundation made us a grant for $750,000 to expand our work, making our partners' materials more accessible for use in the Wikimedia Commons, including in use in Wikipedia. And I need to say a special note, as a former grant maker, it was a sprint grant process. It came together really quickly. And one of the really lovely things about it is that the community stood up and helped us engage and secure that grant. And many of you are here with us today. So thank you, Ben and Leigh in particular, who I see, who are among several folks that responded to a really rapid request for support as we finalized that proposal. You know, that work that we've been doing with Wikimedia grew out of DPLA Fest that we hosted in 2019, and conversations that Catherine, who's here, Catherine Meyer, also from the board, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, helped us pull together. Excuse me, I have a cat scratching at the door. She's gonna keep scratching if I don't let her in, so I have to let her in. Cat interruption from the DPLA presentation. The first stage in that work that we did that Sloan supported with us in 2020 was creating a DPLA data fellow. And Dominic, who's here today and has been leading that work for us ever since, is the manifestation of that. And you'll be hearing from him directly. Some of the output of that work, of that test phase, that prototyping phase, has really made this work and the engagement with Wikimedia a core tenet of what we do here at DPLA. We've shared 3 million documents, photographs and documents through this work, 3 million of our partners' files into Wikimedia Commons for use. And it's resulted in more than 150 million views on Wikipedia itself. So I'm gonna let the team give you and our guests give you a fuller update on what that work is. I wanna say a little bit, we announced this big $750,000 amazing grant from Sloan. We're rolling it out. We announced it last week. We're beginning to plan the work more deeply this week. Some of you who are going to be involved in helping to plan it were on vacation until fairly recently, so we look forward to welcoming you to the table. The goals of the grant are to make more material available for use in Wikimedia Commons and to partner with more organizations. That's really the core of what the work is going to be. And I think one of the exciting things for us on the team is that the funding is going to enable us to create a new position as part of that work. And without putting undue deadlines on the team, I think you can look for that news of that position in coming weeks. And we're really excited about that. The last thing I'll say is, our work is driven, our work to expand access is driven by 3 what we call strategic principles. One is optimism that digital tools can actually result in a better society. Another is ensuring that we're empowering institutions and communities that have historically been underserved by projects like ours. And the third is designing and doing our work through partnerships that are designed to be mutually beneficial. And I'll just say, as those of you who collaborate, it's hard work. It takes a lot of energy and focus. It's incredibly rewarding. Everything we do is through partnerships. But I want to acknowledge and just thank both the team, Michael and Shaneé, who you see here, and Dominic and Kat, who's here, everyone on the team who have to develop these collaborative muscles, and to our partners. And the levels of trust and faith and goodwill that's required to collaborate across organizations, I think sometimes we forget about because the word collaboration we throw around, but I want to acknowledge the work that we and our partners have been putting into that. And as part of that work on the Wikimedia, we've created a working group that guides that work. So I'm going to ask Kat to name check the folks in the chat, but I want to briefly share out a shout to Meredith from NARA, Eben from Boston Public and Digital Commonwealth, Christine from Harvard, Jamie from National Agricultural Library, Giovanna from Wikimedia, Rachel from BYU and our Mountain West Digital Library, Evan from Washington State Library and Northwest Digital Heritage, Angela, who's on our advisory council and also comes from Georgia Public Library and Digital Library of Georgia, and Greta from Ohio University Libraries and our friends at ODN. And of course, and that working group is chaired, run, facilitated by Dominic, who's been at the center of this work for us. So for all of you who have helped kick off this work from DPLA Fest up until today, thank you so much. I'm really excited to see where this grows and goes in the future. And it's largely, in part, going to be dependent on the participation of all of us. So with that, I am going to turn the mic over to my friends and colleagues, Michael and Shaneé, to really tell us what this work has meant and what it looks like, and to bring us into a conversation.
So, hi, everybody. My name is Michael Della. I'm the Director of Technology at DPLA. And just speaking about Wikipedia in general, you know, Wikipedia receives over 1 billion visits a month. It's a top 10 website in terms of traffic. It's up there with Google and Facebook and Amazon, which are all trillion-dollar companies. But Wikimedia and Wikipedia are run mostly on volunteer labor that competes with Silicon Valley giants. And they're the largest audience for, they contain or serve the largest audience for reference materials. And I think as a field, it's important for us to go engage users where they're seeking knowledge rather than assuming they'll just be guided to us. So thanks to the Sloan Foundation for kicking this work off for us. We've been exploring the impact that we can have by bringing cultural heritage items to network, from our network to this platform. And over the past 3 years, DPLA has become the largest single contributor to Wikimedia Commons, which is the digital asset management system of Wikipedia. When these items are added to Wikipedia articles, they end up receiving orders of magnitude more views, while helping users learn about the topics they're interested in. The road we've traveled to get here hasn't been very easy. We've had to invent a media upload pipeline from our partners to Wikimedia Commons. We've had to build a metadata synchronization process, so our updates, the updates from our partners' records are made to Wikimedia Commons as well. We've had to work with our partners to implement machine-readable rights statements so we know what's eligible to be uploaded. And we've had to work with the Wikimedia community to ensure that activities that we undertake are acceptable to them and pave a way for similar work by other institutions. And so I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Shaneé Yvette Willis, who's the Director of Community Engagement at DPLA, and she's going to lead a discussion with people from a variety of institutions who are contributing to the work. Shaneé?
Thank you, Michael. As we think about the ongoing Wikimedia work, our large goal is to really bridge the gap between libraries, museums, and Wikipedia. And our panelists for this afternoon represent all three perspectives of that conversation. As we're developing our work plan for the Sloan Grant, we're focusing on two major areas of work: community engagement and content. Examples of that include providing more capacity for GLAM organizations to increase access via Wikimedia, and expand the use of web materials, to develop and grow audiences for library materials by making them more discoverable, particularly collections and material about under-researched, under-described, and underrepresented communities. As part of that work, we're also responding to needs for more community and coordination, including creating more on-ramps and trainings for DPLA partners into Wikimedia. To start our discussion off, I'd like to just go around, although Michael and John have dropped some names, but to give folks their full recognition and the titles and acknowledge their coordination of the projects that they'll be speaking to. Our DPLA Data Fellow and Chair of the DPLA Wikimedia Working Group, Dominic Byrd-McDevitt, will be speaking about some of the impacts of what we've done thus far and how the Wikimedia Working Group will continue that. Leigh, Jeremias, who's the digital collection consultant at the Colorado State Library and coordinates the Wikimedia work at the Plains to Peaks Collective. She'll talk a bit about how participation in the Wikimedia project has been a value add for partners through the Hub Network. Ben Vershbow, who is the Director of Community Programs for Wikimedia Foundation, will talk about those links and bridging the gaps. To start us off, Dominic, can you give us a bit about how, as the project continues, DPLA will improve quality of records, and give us, your perspective as our network into the community, about how the work is gotten to this place thus far.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I wanted to just, before I speak on that, just to acknowledge a big loss in our community, Effie Capsalis, who was the guest speaker for our last Wikimedia webinar. Her pioneering work at the Smithsonian really did a lot to move things forward in cultural heritage work on Wikipedia and open access generally. So I know all of us that do work in this sector with Wikipedia are feeling that loss. So having said that, just to answer your question, I just want to talk a little bit about go more in depth on what Michael's talking about, and talk some about like the challenges we've faced keeping this project going since its inception, and kind of help us all imagine, I think, what a fully funded program could accomplish. So as John says, the person that's been largely responsible for carrying out DPLA's Wikimedia work for the last 2 years, that's essentially consisted of ensuring that we were able to meet our commitments on a number of smaller grants with a specific scope that came after the original Sloan funding in 2020, while also, trying to maintain that original digital asset pipeline that we had built in 2020, and do that in such a way that there was always this ability to provide the service that we built, and not really no outward appearance of the underfunding, and continuing to maintain the relationships with all of our project participants and stakeholders in a way that kind of like shielded them from that underlying uncertainty. So the reason for that situation, I think, is really because we were victims of our own success in 2020. The original Sloan grant actually envisioned DPLA as uploading a pilot collection. I think John just described it as a test, with the goal of better understanding how an aggregator like DPLA could accomplish a mass ingest of digital assets to Wikimedia Commons. But in a lot of ways, we did that pilot, and then we also went ahead and set up the whole production pipeline in the first year also. And the biggest demonstration of that is that, at the end of that first year, we'd already uploaded 1 million files to Wikimedia Commons and become the largest cultural institution contributing to Wikimedia Commons. And not only that, but actually in November of 2020, there was an 8-day period where half of all those uploads took place. So we really proved that we could scale up as well. So having done all that and demonstrated all that value for our partners, we weren't going to just like kill off the project at the end of 2020. Funding we've had since then has been enough, equivalent to basically a quarter of a full-time employee for the last 2 years after that. And I took a look at where things stood at the end of 2020 and where they are now. And in those 2 years of lesser funding, we've doubled the number of hubs participating in the project. We've tripled the number of uploads to Wikimedia Commons, and we've quadrupled the number of page views. So all of that has been happening, continuing throughout, which is good, but there's consequences to doing things that way, and it's not always been, not everything has been successes. One big example I will give is that over the last over those last 2 years, there was a single editor on Wikipedia who was responsible for following around and reverting dozens of edits made by some of our project participants from DPLA, from across the network, from Georgia libraries, Colorado, Ohio. So the pushback that some institutions received makes the situation more complex because, that kind of, when everything's going smoothly, you can continue to operate a pipeline by running code that was developed in 2020 and not devoting new resources to it, but actually handholding new institutional Wikipedia editors and helping negotiate these kind of social interactions with the Wikipedia community should definitely be part of like a fully formed pipeline and program. But that's what that type of thing is what we've been lacking. And we're doing that while at the same time increasing our participation. And so, yeah, I mean, last year, before we actually secured the grant that we're currently working on, before this announcement, we were even starting to think about how DPLA would continue this work if there was no funding at all when that ran out. And those conversations were part of what led us to propose the Wikimedia Working Group, which started last fall. And I think the idea has been that for our big picture goals to be successful and for us to maximize the impact that we can have, we really need the whole network to be participating and putting its energy and direction behind it, and maybe even the ability to devolve some of these tasks that could be bottlenecked by having a single DPLA staff member responsible for them all, to having more peers across the network working together and solving those problems. So yeah, I'm hoping for 2023 that with this this new funding, this infusion of funding, as well as the working group that's gotten off to a good start and been a really vibrant group, that DPLA's Wikimedia work is about to really take off even more.
Thank you, Dominic. Since you brought up value and scaling up the work, I'd love to hear from Leigh about how Plains to Peaks Collective, which is the Colorado-Wyoming hub, which first partnered as one of our first contributors to the Wikimedia project in 2020. How has the project added value for the academic, small, and public libraries of the PPC? What are some of the opportunities and challenges that you all experienced onboarding folks to contribute to the project?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And Dominic brought up one challenge that I completely forgot about when I was thinking about this. But first, we really jumped at the opportunity to share items with Wikimedia because of Wikimedia's wide reach, its large and active user base, and as a way to reach people we otherwise couldn't. We see this as an opportunity to be proactive, and Michael brought this up a little bit too, to bring items to where users already are and not just to rely on users coming to us or our partners directly to engage with our historic collections. We also feel that projects like this are sort of an added bonus to DPLA participation, and it adds value to being a member of our hub. So in other words, we often tell partners, like, if you share collections with us in the DPLA, you're also doing this, this, and this, and it's really little effort on their part to participate in these sort of bonus projects. Our hub, though, is a small but mighty party of about 5 staff, and we each manage other programs and projects. So our time is pretty limited. As a hub manager, I probably spend the most amount of time on DPLA hub work, and that's still only about half of my my work time. I share this just because it speaks to how we approach the Wikimedia project. Our sort of unspoken and unofficial hub model has always been to keep it simple. In some ways, we are forced to keep it simple because of the small staff that I just mentioned, but we also keep it simple because we don't want our partners to feel overwhelmed by participation in the DPLA or any of the other opportunities that come from that participation. We also show and stress that these projects only build upon the hard work that our partners have already done. Partners that participate in the DPLA have already digitized their collections and created and shared the metadata, and Michael definitely touched on this, and DPLA has done so much work to figure this out and make the sharing of metadata as smooth as possible, and all that work makes it really easy for our partners to then share items with another platform like Wikimedia. Our approach at our hub might be a little different than others, but our approach has always been to let partners choose whether or not they would like to share items with Wikimedia. As a hub, we still have some contributing partners that are hesitant to share full media files. Only partners that want to share items with Wikimedia are sharing the IIIF manifest and the full media files with us. And then DPLA will only pull the appropriate items from those partners. For our partners, that means they feel comfortable and confident in what they're sharing with us. So we currently have 6 PPC partners out of 67 roughly participating in the Wikimedia project, and they are sharing just over 55,000 files. And these partners run the gamut from a small public library and historical society to large universities and a large public library. Participation for these partners is relatively easy. They're all using the appropriate rights statements for the most part, or they are at least reviewing and updating this information on a fairly regular basis. And they are all using systems that can easily share the required files, the IIIF manifest or the full media file. We do have challenges as a hub. With a small amount of staff, like I mentioned, we can't take on the long-term work of adding images to articles and creating new articles. However, initially when we first started with Wikimedia, we were prepared to take on the work of adding items to articles in order to prove the benefit of participation. And I always want to stress how easy, and I can't really stress it enough, how easy it is to add items to Wikipedia articles. Finding an image that relates to an existing article and then adding that image takes on average about 5 to 10 minutes. It's a bit of a drag and drop. And so if you created blog post with images, it's very similar. I added an image of a very cute baby wild boar to a wild boar article, and that's a super easy addition. And that item received over 71,000 views in just 1 month. And those kind of numbers for an item like that just can't be achieved in DPLA or even by the contributing partner within their home database. And in total, within the English Wikipedia site, we've added 80 items, mostly myself, added 80 items to pages. And during our highest month, those pages have received over 500,000 views. Again, those are numbers that we can't reach on our own, and it definitely proves the value of participating in a project like that with little effort on our partners' part. As I said, we did have some challenges to participation. I mentioned some of them: the staff limitations, hesitation to share full media files. Another challenge is accurate rights information. While all of our partners are using rights statements and a few are using Creative Commons licenses, many are using the statement copyright not evaluated. So with these partners, we know that they will have rights work to do if they want to share items with Wikimedia, and that's going to definitely be challenging. Also, like many hub partners, use a variety of different systems, and not all those systems are able to fully able to share these files that are necessary. For example, Past Perfect, many of our smaller museums and historical societies use Past Perfect as their collection management system. While you can share a the fullest version of an image, at the moment it can't share all the images included for an object, such as the pages of a document. And as I said, many of our smaller institutions use Past Perfect, and so that's going to be a challenge too. And one other challenge that Dominic brought up is that we did have the one Wikimedia editor make changes to many of the images that were added by one of our partners, and they were very upset. And I will say that that was disappointing, but definitely as soon as it was brought to my attention and I brought it to DPLA's attention, Dominic was on it. We had a meeting with the partner. We talked about ways that we could add items that wouldn't necessarily, I don't even know if this is a great way to say this, targeted by this user, but and I think while our partner was disappointed, and that's not something I wanted to necessarily happen with this participation, the way Dominic and DPLA responded to it, our concerns, was wonderful, and it helps sort of smooth the situation out. And that partner has gone back and started to do the work again. So that was wonderful.
Thank you, Leigh. That's a really encouraging conclusion to the story about dealing with a Wikipedia editor with some of the community dynamics. Before we move on to Ben, I want to pull further on the thread that both you and Dominic brought up about ease of use and making participation in the project simple. Dominic, in what ways does the Wikimedia Working Group have on their agenda creating tools and facilitating training that makes things like assigning copyright and doing bulk uploads? How are we planning to make that a bit easier?
Yeah, I would say kind of two different ways that we're planning to tackle that. One is, and I mentioned this in our very first working group meeting, that one of my main goals for the group was documentation, which I know is like not always the most interesting thing that everybody wants to spend their time on. And I was really gratified that a lot of the rest of the working group is also interested in spending time on that. And that's something that is really, you know, has fallen by the wayside with, like I said, with 2 years of funding that was not specifically tied to doing things like increasing our you know, documentation or training. So a lot of the things that as the project has developed over the last 2 years, it's been a lot of like word of mouth. Every new partner as they're onboarded gets a training from me, but there's not, you know, even up-to-date information, I think, like on the website yet about how the current status of the project or how you join or things like that. It's kind of like email Dominic. So what we would really like to do is focus on getting a lot of better information out there, and, you know, steps to follow for a lot of different things, like how a hub would join, how to make an edit. There's a lot of different types of opportunities there for better documentation. And then the other thing, just kind of, this is a little more amorphous, but I think one of just the broad goals of the working group would be to help kind of develop a sort of a community of practice within the DPLA network. And to the extent that there are more institutions working together in concert on this project and developing their skills and capacity, then there's, you know, more voices on Wikipedia. When there's discussions about something, there's more people you can turn to. You know, having myself, you know, not being the bottleneck anymore as like someone who is has you know, there's such a large network with thousands of institutions that you know, we really need to build out that capacity more. So
Thanks, Dominic. Documentation is definitely important, being able to point to the work and written tools that, you know, show the process. Back to Leigh, as an expert, you know, Wikipedia article editor now, who can demonstrate, you know, how inserting 1 or 2 pictures results in so many more page views. What kinds of professional training and support projects are you planning for Plains to Peaks collective participants in the project going forward?
That's a good question. You know, we know that adding images to existing articles is just only part of the project. We need to be creating articles too. But that brings up another challenge, you know, that we face, you know, our time and our partners' time and effort. So, you know, when I talk to people about it, I really try to stress building upon work that they're already doing, you know, maybe repurposing blog posts and, you know, things that have already been written, text from exhibits, and using that to create articles. We are currently, we did work to develop a graduate student project, one of our partners. and that was hope was that we would use the graduate student project as a prototype to have them be doing the work and myself be along with our partner mentoring that student. But for no fault of anybody's, that had to be put on the back burner for now. But I know that partner is always willing to jump at ideas that I throw at them. So I'm hopeful that will happen that work will happen in the future, and we can use that as sort of a jumping off point to sort of support our partners in that work, but our partners supporting us and helping to grow, that collaborative effort. Another thing that I talked about too, that we know we have to work on is the right statements, and planning for training on how to evaluate rights and use the appropriate right statements will really probably open the door. If partners are using appropriate right statements, that will open the door for them to be able to participate as well. So we have to do some of that training in the future as well.
We've got support for that kind of work in the grant,
Yeah.
so it'll be a joint effort. Then we've talked quite a bit about community and sustaining community and community engagement. Could you talk to us a bit about Wikimedia Movement's 2030 strategic direction that centers the concept of knowledge equity, and how you all are thinking about partnerships and projects that center community around diversity and collections and advancing equity and inclusion practices in the overall community?
Yeah, thank you, Shaneé, for the question. And thank you for having me here, and to the whole DPLA board. And it's great to see so many familiar and unfamiliar faces here. Yeah, it's a really important question. And maybe I can take a step back and sort of come up to that, because I have a few reflections that have been simmering just as Dominic and Leigh have been describing how this work has progressed. And it's a kind of a thrill to be here, actually, because I feel I'm with current and former collaborators from a few different kind of micro eras of work that I've been kind of engaged in for almost 2 decades. And it's a reminder to me that I think this kind of work we're doing in building kind of public digital infrastructure is inherently iterative. It builds, one stage builds on a previous stage, infrastructures are built on others, communities start to intersect and converge. And I think that even reflecting on how far DPLA has come, I think is instructive. I came to Wikimedia Movement from a library orientation. I was at the New York Public Library for over 8 years. Michael and I actually were colleagues at one point, so there's a nice continuity there. Dominic, a longtime Wikimedian, but has done maybe, like you could say, kind of a first draft of this work at the National Archives, where for a long time he was embedded and kind of proved out that pipeline from one very sizable, one very substantial institution. But in many ways, that's work that is being built on here at DPLA. And I kind of feel that this work represents kind of like almost a move to like a DPLA 2.0. When I was at the library, the New York Public Library, that was around, that was during the time that DPLA was launched. NYPL was a founding content hub. And I think that we saw then kind of a paradigm of like, we will build this aggregation and then everyone will come to it. And I think that proved to be both true and untrue in certain ways. I think the aggregation was in itself a massive piece of work and hard, and it still continues to be a challenge, aggregating messy metadata or inconsistent metadata from so many different places. But I think what has started to happen is, DPLA has been thinking more intensively about how can they really offer new kinds of value, like through that aggregation. How can it connect? So DPLA, not just as destination, but as connector to the larger web ecosystem. And I feel like the Wikimedia work that's already been kind of proved out at some considerable scale, as Dominic described, is showing, I think, that really powerful new kind of value add that DPLA can provide to its network. It's also, I think, kind of helping to show how an entity like DPLA, I'm going to come back to your question, Shaneé. It's a very important question, but I think it builds on these kind of like, how did we get to this point? This work of Wikimedia and cultural heritage institutions has been going on for a long time. Along the way, different institutions, often kind of championed by a knowledgeable staff member who is seeing the potential Wikimedia, or Wikimedians, enterprising Wikimedians come in knocking on the door, trying to kind of break in and figure out how to kind of forge a collaboration, have been uploading content to Wikimedia for years, and the kind of the consistent thread there, and the kind of the rationale is, you know, this incredible reach that you do get. The Welcome collection in London last year reported that they've received 1.5 billion views of their content over time on Wikimedia, for example. But we often find ourselves kind of exalting these like big showcase kind of institutions, these big kind of lighthouse institutions that have, while facing their own challenges, do have more resources, more capability to kind of to do this collaboration. And what I think is really powerful around DPLA kind of proving out this kind of role as this bridge is that it brings this much more diverse network of institutions of all shapes and sizes, different types, historical societies, archives, libraries, museums, every kind of flavor of institution, every kind of flavor of community, and every kind of like niche of content. And it's bringing that into a more kind of consolidated pipeline, where a lot of those, that kind of tough work that only I think a small handful of institutions have figured out to do, can actually be kind of consolidated and streamlined in a lot of ways. What of course can't be streamlined and I think consolidated and optimized in that way is all that kind of more fine-grained curatorial work and community engagement work. And I think that's where the working group and that human network is going to be such a key piece. Even before this big Sloan grant was announced, the announcement of that working group to me signaled a really, really exciting and important step forward about building that human network, because it's in that kind of contextualizing and bringing specific collections to light that requires a lot of like, you know, expertise that you're not going to be able to kind of optimize or mechanize or automate. You know, you're going to need to find ways to bring knowledgeable people into that process. And so I think that combination of this kind of robust technical pipeline, taking on a lot of the boring but kind of replicable and automatable to some extent technical work, and kind of doing that service for this broader network, can open up capacity to kind of do this much more substantive and rich, and I think you know, content-based and community-based work. And in terms of the knowledge equity being this really important, and it's also great to see Catherine here, my former executive director of the Wikimedia Foundation, who has played such a massive role in sort of focusing the Wikimedia community and like kind of channeling a lot of thinking that had already been happening across the community in this kind of articulation of knowledge equity as a cardinal principle. I think that's really kind of being reflected across the sector. The ICOM, the kind of big international body of museums, recently kind of converged around a new definition of museums that much more centers inclusivity and kind of bringing together diverse intersectional audiences, and, you know, museums as spaces, both physical and virtual. And I think that this is what is sort of becoming not just sort of a nice to have, but a kind of a front and center kind of rationale and purpose for how institutions can be driving this change. And a great example, and Dominic was very moved, and if I seem a little maybe distracted right now, I'm still kind of carrying that weight of the loss of Effie Capsalis. I was just actually in DC yesterday for a beautiful memorial service at the Smithsonian, the American Art Museum. But I want to highlight the work that she did there, and a number of other fantastic Wikimedians Dominic knows well and has worked with for years. Have been doing there for the last number of years, that I think really exemplifies this and sheds a light on like what could be done, all those niches that could be illuminated through the DPLA network, and that Leigh, the great work that you've started to do in Colorado, I think kind of blazes a trail for. I mean, the Smithsonian, you know, is made of many institutions kind of rolled up into one, and they have their own kind of fragmentation problem. You know, there's different kind of collection silos, different kind of data management kind of neighborhoods. And so they found some real incredible potential in Wikidata, another one of our projects, in sort of like surfacing and connecting entities, knowledge that's held, but in fragments around a massive institution. And then have been using that to build lists that surface marginalized figures and untold stories, like women scientists who've made really dramatic contributions, but are not documented, don't have a Wikipedia article, are barely known in the kind of accessible public record that you can reach online. And so what I really have loved about the Smithsonian, which launched its open access program in 2020, right before the pandemic set in, is that they've not just sort of put an impressive number of items out there for the public to engage with, but they've kind of done it with a really big why, you know, attached to that, around specific storylines that they really want to amplify, and that's been most focused on in their American Women's History Initiative. But they are, basically contributing to a whole new set of Wikipedia biographies, either underdeveloped ones or missing ones, bringing images in there. They're finding that a lot of their most trafficked content on Wikimedia Commons is of figures from marginalized histories. The kind of default image of Sojourner Truth, for example, that will come up like in the Google Knowledge panel is an image provided by the Smithsonian. And so weaving into that common knowledge layer, either on Wikimedia or in the larger web ecosystem that Wikimedia kind of uniquely funnels into, I think is incredibly powerful. You see those results very quickly. And so it gets your imagination going of what other innumerable niches that are held in all these fantastic institutions of all shapes and sizes in the DPLA network could be illuminated. But it's going to take human work. DPLA is closing that gap, unlike all the technical hard work that it takes, taking advantage of the really laborious aggregation it's done over the years to be able to connect these institutions to a platform like Wikimedia. But it's going to take the development of a human network to really be able to kind of illuminate all those niches. And I thought, since I think it looks like we could share links here, I wanted to share a great blog post that I won't try to summarize now in any depth, but I think does a good job connecting it to like one individual human story. And it's not the story, it contains stories of marginalized figures and underrepresented knowledge that's been brought to light through the Smithsonian work, but it's actually the story of the person who did the work. And I think this goes to the kind of the point you were making, Leigh, about this, I think it was a graduate program. And I would love to share this because I think that is exactly where we should be thinking about, like, how is this work, which of course the honeypot is the reach, the page views. It's an undeniable draw. It's an undeniable benefit. But I think this larger collaboration could be a way that we're really rethinking the profession and developing new capacities and kind of competencies to do more relevant public engagement beyond the walls of the library, beyond the digital walls of individual small websites and collections, into a kind of integrated knowledge layer. And so I'll drop this post, which is a story of an intern a paid intern who joined the American Women's History Initiative, mentored by Kelly Doyle, who's an amazing Wikimedian, kind of embedded there doing that work. And she became, as a prolific contributor, closed a lot of knowledge gaps, created a lot of new content, augmented existing content. And again, this one story, I think, illuminates, her name is Mia Cariello. And she was focusing a lot, among other things, I mean, really on her own kind of Asian American heritage, but really venturing into a lot of other intersectional areas. And when I see this story, I imagine it being multiplied across all the kind of aspiring kind of museum and library and archives professionals who are looking for professional development and are looking for digital skill sets and skill sets that can make their work more relevant to a larger contemporary audience. And I think there's a really great way to kind of harness that drive and that professional development ambition to this project. So I've really encouraged the working group to think about that as an element, not just engage in the current professionals who are already there and kind of thinking about this opportunity, but how do we kind of cultivate a new generation? Because they will ultimately lead us to these new audiences and make this newly relevant to young audiences and folks who are really not even able to reach yet, and create that kind of sustainability, as you said, Shaneé, of like, how does that human work and technical work continue over the long run, over many iterations of this kind of infrastructure work. So that's just a few things I wanted to mention. The Smithsonian example, I think, shines a light that we all can follow. And they themselves have a kind of like a network structure through their affiliates, the small institutions around the country that kind of give you a kind of almost a little bit of an analogy to DPLA's spread and reach. So I think there's a lot of really fertile ground to explore here to build on these excellent foundations. But anyway, I just want to congratulate everyone. And I'm just really excited to get like a 3-year runway to work together in this, because I think even in that 3 years, we're going to iterate a lot and learn a lot and try some things that don't work, encounter some crotchety Wikimedians who occasionally will be a bit, give us some, there'll be a little backlash, a little bit of trouble. But I think, again, bringing more of this participation from this wonderful sector into Wikimedia is going to help do culture change in the Wikimedia community that is needed, which is sometimes a little pricklier than we would like. So, I see tremendous potential here, and I'll stop now. But yeah, it's it all in the end, I think, though, comes to that driving equity kind of mandate and imperative.
Thank you, Ben. We really appreciate having you as a conversation partner and support. There was a question I was going to ask to wrap up around how we tell this story of the Wikimedia project. I think that the the blog that you dropped is really important, because as part of our project planning, the DPLA team is thinking about how to present project outcomes with stakeholders beyond our typical metrics, which are page views, talking about, you know, some of the stories of how editing Wikimedia pages has been a new tech skill for graduate students. We're thinking about different audiences, how to tell the story of our work with funders, Wikimedians, GLAMS folks, journalists who would be interested in how we're partnering to leverage more stories. So I'm really glad that you hit on that. Now I'll turn it over to Michael, who has a question in the Q&A that he wants to answer live. I think he answered it in the background and wants to do it now so that everyone has the benefit of hearing the response.
So yeah, actually, I don't know if I'm the person to answer this, but I'm going to bring it up. Evan Knight asked, could you describe this issue in some more detail? And I think he was talking about really the crotchety Wikimedia editor issue. And generally speaking, I think it gets at the heart of maybe a culture clash between the standards and practices in the GLAM world and the standards and practices of the Wikimedia world, when those two folks from those two different worlds are not familiar with the other. Dominic, do you want to just kind of give an overview of what has been going on?
Yeah, I mean, so just to point out the obvious, Wikipedia is not a publishing platform like any other that institutions use. So it is a skill, and it's not intuitive, you know, how to engage, the best tactics to engage with the Wikipedia community in ways that are, you know, most likely to be successful. Sometimes, most of the time, you might contribute images to Wikipedia, you know, for months and months before ever even having a single interaction with the Wikipedia editor. But, you know, sometimes the opposite happens. So a lot of times it's hard to like train or prepare someone for the type, like, you know, meeting resistance. It's much really like what we can do or give people tactics for what to do, like train people to be ready for the fact that you're engaging with the community. You're not just you know, publishing things on the platform that you own. In fact, there's an actual Wikipedia policy that's called or that says no Wikipedia editors own the content of a page. So it's very different, I think, from like what how you know, professionals and academics and people engaged in this kind of in the information sector are used to. So that's one answer, I think, is just like that there needs to be this kind of support network for institutions as they get involved, so that when they encounter these issues, they have you know, people who have their back and can walk them through it, and you know, give them pointers or even participate in the discussions. And it's really hard to do that if you're a new editor doing that on your own. The other thing I would say is that, you know, the more institutions get involved, and the more especially that we have a shared voice together, the more we're part of the Wikipedia community and can, you know, you were saying there's a culture clash, the more we can actually like be part of that culture and kind of change the culture as a whole, and you know, have more cultural understanding, I guess, of GLAMs within the Wikipedia community. That's kind of like the long-term vision. So just broadly speaking, the more involvement we have, the better things will be.
I see in the chat that Ben dropped the popular recommendation, please don't fight the newcomers, as a behavioral guideline for Wikimedia. Since we've got, you know, the board on the line, I counted not robbery to ask Catherine to respond to what she's heard so far, since so much of the Wikimedia work was, you know, designed at the beginning with with her ideas and ideation and support. Catherine, what do you think about where we're going with the project and what you've heard so far?
Sure. Oh, goodness. Thank you. I'm excited to be invited to the conversation. I mean, I'm thrilled that we are now at a place where this project, which I think has long demonstrated a modality of working with Wikipedia for partners and institutions, is in a place where it has more robust support and more of a sort of timeline and runway, not just for what it means for sort of the particulars of the project, but because it represents within the Wikimedia and the free knowledge ecosystem a structural engagement that offers us the opportunity to really learn through the process of working on this together, including how to address some of the challenges that have come up already in conversation, whether it be those technical, sort of training-based or even community interaction-based, and think about how to expand that not just within the DPLA network, but across other institutions of learning and public education and information. So I'm really, really excited about that. And I think that, you know, it really warmed my heart to hear Ben and others refer to the importance of this work when it comes to knowledge equity, because that was such a huge piece and consolidated sort of outcome of the Wikimedia community's conversations with itself over the course of the last, I mean, really decade, I want to say. It's been many leaders within the community speaking to that for some time now, but certainly within the last 5 years, understanding that that is absolutely integral, not only to sort of the core of interpreting Wikimedia's mission, but really to thinking about what is going to make for a thriving community and a thriving project over the long run, and gives so many new potential partners and avenue into Wikimedia's work, groups, individuals, efforts, and lines of inquiry that might not have previously understood themselves to be a part of this project. I think it really opens the door for different ways of thinking about, you know, who belongs in what we think about notability, and who has the ability to be in discourse around what notability actually means. And I just really love that there's so many institutions in this network that are so committed to that work that come to bear. And of course, I'd be completely remiss not to just note that it's so exciting to see the complete sort of turn of the circle in many ways when it comes to this idea of partnerships between librarians and library institutions and the Wikimedia ecosystem, because many, many years back, that was not necessarily a foregone conclusion that we would find ourselves with these skill sets so aligned and this public commitment so aligned, working in cooperation. I think at an earlier point in time, that would have been difficult to predict. And so I'm thrilled that these two communities see the value in one another and understand that we are really sort of kindred spirits in this work. So thank you for the chance, and I hope that reflects the perspective. I think as a trustee of DPLA, I just have brings two things together that are really wonderful institutions that offer so much greater enrichment to both. So it's a thrilling thing to see.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We have another question in the chat around bulk uploads. Michael?
Sure. So the question was, has DPLA worked on bulk uploading media to Wikimedia Commons? And the answer is yes. Everything that we have uploaded has been done in bulk. It would be a tremendous strain on my mouse finger otherwise. We have spent a bunch of time working on, a pipeline that downloads media from our partners and uploads it and then maintains the metadata over time. And it's definitely something we're proud of. And it's something that we can replicate over time. So we're doing this all via a Wikimedia bot that, kind of takes care of it for us. And we hope to upload more than 3 million in the next year or in the next few years. Our goal is actually a lot more audacious than that. So we're really relying on our ability to do that in bulk to meet those goals.
So I am being pinged to say it's my turn to step in because otherwise we've hit the hour mark. Shaneé and participants, Ben and Leigh in particular, and Dominic and Michael, thank you so much. That was an incredibly rich dive discussion. I want to do two things very briefly. One, give a shout out to another one of the founding mothers of this work is Pam Wright from NARA, who I see in the participant group. So thank you, Pam, for being such a core part of getting this going and keeping it going. And I also want to see two board members who I missed because I wasn't reading the list. Marcia Walker McWilliams from the Black Metropolis Research Consortium is here, and Josh Frazier. Gosh, why did I just blank on your other last name, Josh? Help me. Oh my gosh. Sparks. Oh my goodness. That is so terrible. From Walmart is here. Thanks, Josh. Sorry. Oh my goodness. I blame it on the cat scratching my legs down below me. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you'll come to our next events coming up. One thing I will note is Dominic and Shaneé are on their way to New Orleans for I think it's the inaugural American Library Association Library Learn Exchange, LibLearnX. Ben, I can't remember, I'm seeing you nod. I can't remember whether you're going, whether we got you to go or not, but it's going to be a deeper kind of more
Sadly, no, but it sounds
seminar, hands-on discussion in line with how ALA is doing it. We're not getting you there, Ben? All right, but it will be super.
I wish,
So if
I
you're
wish.
going to New Orleans, the end of January, we'll be there. And Felton, over you to bring us home.
No, I just want to thank everyone for a really rich discussion, and just take the time to thank everyone, all the panelists and the staff, of course, for a job well done, and Catherine for just being there and being able to just check in and talk about your past history. So we want to thank all of those folks who are joining us for the open meeting and the community meeting, and see you the next time.